Hi, I'm Chris, a senior at Harvard, and today Professor Peterson will talk about the media. This lecture consists of two parts. Part 1, how powerful are the media? And Part 2, are the media biased? We're going to start off with a question. How important are the effects of mass media on American politics and government?
Well, it all depends on the issue. If you look at the Vietnam War, you can say that the media played an absolutely major role in bringing that war to an end. When the Tet Offensive occurred and there was all kinds of attacks on American installations all over the country, the stories in the media were overwhelming of people dying, of Americans running, of American installations under heavy target. And after it all ended, Walter Cronkite, the most respected man in American media at the time, CBS commentator, had a respect that no commentator has today, declared the end of the Vietnam War. And I'm going to let you hear how he declared the end of the war. Now, it turns out that the Tet Offensive was not nearly as successful at attacking U.S. targets as the media presented it at the time. But the political impact was absolutely enormous, in part because the media gave it unbelievable coverage. Now, that's one way of looking at the media. Very, very powerful.
So the media were powerful in the case of the Vietnam War. Is this always so?
Well, you can take the Chicago demonstrations of 1968, which were almost as dramatic. The police battered the protesters. We're going to show you a whole video of just how awesome that event was. And the media was very anti-police and very pro-demonstrators because these were students coming out of the universities. They weren't the kind of demonstrators and rioters that get the public angry, you would think. But that's not the way it turned out. The public supported the police. They supported Mayor Daley. And Mayor Daley and his son Daley were elected mayor for another 40 years. In fact, Richard Daley Jr. just stepped down as mayor about 2-3 years ago. So, no, the media had very little impact in this case.
What in general have political scientists concluded about the power of the media?
So those are just two stories, but what can you say about the situation overall? Does the media have much of an effect? And the political scientists who have looked at this say, well, if you want to look at basic values, political identities, whether to be a Republican or a Democrat or important issues out there, the media does not change opinion on the issues or on values or on political identities very often. Those are unlikely to be impacted by the media. But if you look at some other issues, which we're going to talk about, agenda setting and priming, it's a different matter.
Let's take the first point, the minimal effects thesis. What is the evidence for that?
Well, if you look at lots of issues out there, and we did it earlier in the discussion of public opinion, we saw very little change in abortion. But the abortion issue may be one that is so deeply ingrained in American belief systems that that's unlikely to change. So let me give you another example. Here's public opinion about teacher unions in 2009 and 2011. In between, there was a huge political campaign in which Republicans were very successful. There was a huge battle in Wisconsin and Indiana and other states over whether or not the teacher unions should be have their wings clipped, and they were clipped. And the Republicans felt like they had been very successful. But what happened to public opinion? Well, you see that in 2009, 28% were positive towards the union, 31% were negative, and most of them didn't take a position on the issue one way or the other. 2 years later, look at opinion again, very, very little change, hardly any change at all. So, yeah, the public doesn't respond to media coverage or political campaigns on issues very often.
Moving on to the second point, There is evidence that media can have some effects on what people think about. What do political scientists mean by agenda setting?
Well, media may not be able to tell you what to think, but they may tell you what to think about. And this was proved most clearly by some experimental research, which was done by Professor Iyengar out at San Diego University. What he did is he took groups of viewers into a university laboratory. They were paid to participate. They were told that they were to evaluate advertising. So he tricked them a little bit by getting them to focus on the ads instead of on the news broadcast in which the ads were embedded. Well, one group got the regular news broadcast, and the other one got a doctored news broadcast that puffed up a particular issue. So the real question was here, can a puffing up of an issue by the media get people to change their opinion? And you can actually find out whether that occurs because you have two groups of people who are essentially the same, and you can see whether or not they respond differently depending on whether they got the puffed up issue or whether they got just the regular news broadcast. So what did he find? Well, he found that when they puffed up the defense issue, people were much more likely to identify it as one of the three most serious problems in the United States. And when he puffed up the inflation issue, well, he didn't get much of an effect because everybody thought it was a huge problem anyhow. If he puffed up the pollution issue, he would get it from 0%, because many people didn't think that was a big issue, but he got it up to 15%. Arms control, he was able to puff that one up quite a bit. The civil rights issue, nobody thought that was a significant issue, but 10% did after the intervention. Unemployment, he got a pretty big impact. He got that to shift up from 40 to 70%. And I guess this was another kind of unemployment here that he got a similar effect. So if you look at it all together, you can see that there's a general effect of being able to set the agenda, though it doesn't apply in each and every case.
Finally, what do political scientists mean by priming?
So in the case of priming, political scientists refer to that whenever people are encouraged to evaluate a political figure based on a specific issue. That is to say, if you can get, as a political candidate, your opponent to be evaluated based on his position on an unpopular issue, well, then you can have a chance of defeating your opponent. So can the media encourage people to evaluate a political figure based on a specific issue? And the best example, of course, is the president. Can the media get the public to evaluate the president based upon the president's performance on a specific issue? If you can, then you want to drive public opinion to that issue in order to drive the president's poll ratings up or down, depending on which way the media is biased.
How did the Iyengar lab experiment identify priming?
So we have to go back to Iyengar and his experiments. And remember, we've got two groups, one randomly assigned to seeing the standard news broadcast and the other one being assigned to look at a puffed up news broadcast. So in this case, one's going to be focusing on the civil rights problem, and the other one is just going to get a regular newscast. And then afterwards, the group is asked to evaluate the president, and also they were asked their own position on civil rights issues. So what do we find? Do we find that the group's position on civil rights issues is connected to their evaluation of the president? If media can prime you, then you should see a shift in the connection between evaluations of the presidents and positions on civil rights issues. So that's what Iyengar found. Indeed, he found that on the civil rights issue, if there was no TV coverage, that's the regular broadcast, there is a connection between the evaluation of the president in office at the time and the person's own position on civil rights. But if the TV coverage, the doctored one, where the civil rights issue was puffed up and made into a great big issue, that correlation goes way up. And it's not just civil rights. He found the same thing for unemployment. Some connection if there's no TV coverage, a lot of connection if you get the puffed up broadcast. So yes, the media seems to be able to get you to connect the president's position on an issue to your evaluation of the president if they talk about that issue a lot of the time. Well, I'm going to leave you now with Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, declaring an end to the Vietnam War. And then I'm going to leave you with the Chicago demonstrations, and you can just see how awesome that event was. And the public decided the police were fine. Hit them again, harder, harder.
To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past. To suggest we are on the edge of defeat is to yield to unreasonable pessimism. To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion. On the off chance the military and political analysts are right, in the next few months we must test the enemy's intentions in case this is indeed his last big gasp before negotiations. But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victims, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
Really a bad place to be in.